So it's sort of like, continue. Okay. It's sort of like, if your parents are tall, chances are you are tall. So you get this thing. Okay. We don't need to talk about that. That's obvious. That's linear regression. So that's the first bit of knowledge. Okay. It's kind of like a standalone. He came up with both the methodology, the problem itself, actually, the data set, everything, the whole thing, the whole, one-stop shop. Let's say somebody comes along, right, and looks at his study, okay, and then branch off a little bit. Okay, now I don't know for a fact what the second linear regression problem in history of the world is, but let's say somebody wants to repeat the experiment with another population. Say this was based on English population, so maybe some guy wants to do it on Irish population. Some guy wants to do it on monkey population, all right? So it's kind of like a very closely related. So how is it closely related? The problem is the same. The problem is the same. I'll just write down P. The problem is the same. The methodology is the same, right? M. But the data set is different. Okay? The data set is not the same. So you can imagine this is English population, this is Irish population, or human versus monkeys and whatnot. Okay? Some guy came along, maybe take a branch earlier and say, well, we want to divide something that's kind of like capture the nonlinear relationship. So maybe something like this would be, say, a nonlinear relationship, and you have things like logistic regression and whatnot, right? So right away, you can see that this kind of tree of knowledge is a fruit first. Okay, you start with the fruit, so that's the fruit of the tree, and then the branch came, right? The branch came, and you actually progressively go backward and generalize the knowledge. So maybe here it would be a linear, right? Maybe here it's non-linear. So the methodology now is not the same, okay? And some guy comes along and eventually you come to neural network, right? Machine learning. So that branch of here is non-statistical. So maybe neural network, which is, subject that I teach, and so forth. Okay, the idea is that at the end of the day, this is what the tree of knowledge kind of looks like. Just kind of a whole bunch of branchy little thing. Yeah, and at the end of that, these are the fruits. Okay, these are the fruits. Right. Now, what is the traditional method of acquiring knowledge? Well, it's what we call a many-to-one graph. So I'm going to draw just the fruits of knowledge. Okay. I'm just going to ignore the tree branching structure. So these are little pieces of knowledge. They come to me, or your teacher, or your lecturer, right? And this is your lecturer, and goes to you, a whole bunch of students. Okay. That's many-to-one mapping. There's one-to-many mapping. Okay. Now, what literature survey is doing is once you are beyond classroom setting, this is a classroom. There's a teacher, me in front, and there's you in the back, or you were at home. Okay. Right. Once we get beyond this, what you want to do is cut out the middleman. Okay. So I'm not there as a middleman. So the different picture is this. So these are pieces of knowledge. These are you. Okay? And all of you have to gather that. So it's kind of like a whole big mess of thing. It's a many-to-many mapping. Many to mapping. Okay? That's what this means. This is the process. That's why literature survey, a literature review is not just a workshop on how to write a reference. Okay, you can look it up online. I mean, don't be an idiot. You can just search it, all right? How to write a reference. Okay, but this is the mode of learning that hopefully, in the spirit of Basai, way after you graduate from Basai, you are going to be able to perform for yourself. So it's kind of like a lifelong learning kind of thing. Okay, so it's not just how to write bibliography. Okay, so it's many to view. But here's a difference. Here's a difference from the picture I draw earlier. When I was drawing earlier, right? You have a piece of knowledge. You have somebody who has another piece of knowledge, but kind of like branch off in methodology, in data, in problem, and so forth. And there's a big branch, and maybe you can go back here, and there's another branch, and so forth. So this is kind of like a nice hypothetical knowledge tree. Okay, this is sort of like assuming how things are connected. All the research in the world, machine learning, AI, I don't care, healthcare, health science, everything comes down to this big thing. So it's almost like, you enter the university and this is a universe because you got this big, huge tree of knowledge that covers everything. Well, literature survey is slightly different. Literature survey, you cannot focus on the whole darn tree, basically, right? It's sort of like you kind of interested in these bits here. You're interested in these bits here. And two activity, maybe I can change the color, right? To change the color, can I do that? Huh? Can I change the color? Oh, there it is, sorry. It's a different now. Okay, this is where you come in. Okay, this is where you come in. Let's say you're adding a new piece of, well, you're writing a new paper, right? Applying maybe a well-known technique. So same same methodology, but then you add to it a little bit. You add to it a little bit. So this is your own methodology. Oops. Does it work? Okay. Right? So this is your new M. Okay. Also, your new data. Also, maybe the problem is different. So whatever it is, it's a slightly different combination of pieces of knowledge. That's why it doesn't fit on the tree. Right? You are growing the knowledge tree. So this is what you want to do. You want to add a little something here. Okay? But you can't add that in isolation because, nobody would talk to you because there's no context of where your piece of knowledge contributes. Your knowledge actually contributes to, let's say, to this branch. Okay? And sometimes, now this is where it gets a little bit messy. It doesn't have to be a unique, it could be a little bit like, what you call it? Those parasitic vines that kind of like attach to a tree. So it doesn't have to have a single root. So basically, you're trying to give the context of where you are. Okay? So obviously, look at this picture. What it means is that, number one, you know where you are. Okay? Number two, there is a spot for you. That's number two. Right? So you're not actually repeating somebody's work. That's very important to prove in the literature survey. Okay, if you're doing exactly the same thing that somebody's done before, it's not publishable. It's not research. It's just book report or something. Okay, so number one, you know where you are. Number two, there's a spot, empty spot that you identify. Number three, there's a linkage of your contribution to what's out there. Now, maybe at some point, somebody will erase this kind of like a secondary connection, and you'll be updated. Like you're contributing to a new piece of knowledge. So this becomes almost a permanent fixture. Okay, the next generation comes. Next generation is green. Let's say next generation is green. Now, to them or to him or to her, you are now just an O3 now, just like the red thing, and can go from there. Okay, so that's two things I want to get right away. Number one, literature survey is not about writing the bibliography. Otherwise, I wouldn't drive all the way here to tell you about it. I'll just tell you to go look in the Google search yourself. Number two, okay, so it's a lifelong learning. It's the many to many. It's individual process. Number two, it's all about finding your place and growing the knowledge tree, the tree of knowledge that's sort of like very universal. Okay, so with that in mind, let me go to the mind map. This kind of schematics. Get up. So let's go to the mind map. Yeah. And so first of all, what?
And this is very important. I like to, okay. There's actually two words, there's literature and there's survey. You guys ever wondered, I don't know if you went to like English speaking high school. If you did, you would have studied something like American literature or English literature or something like that, right? So say American literature, what do you study? Well, you study, I don't know, Edgar Allan Poe, or you study Steinbeck, or I don't know, John Updike, something more recent. It's really body of novel, mostly novel, basically not really much of nonfiction, a lot of novels and maybe poetry, right? So what's that got to do with with academic research, right? Because you're not going to say that this paper referencing The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe, or that's not what you do. It turns out, and this is very important, and I like to do this, and I encourage you to do as well. Sometimes you think you understand the word, it's better to actually understand where the word came from, the root of the word, and then you understand. It actually came, I think, this is from Etim Online, very good site I use. So, it actually, the original meaning of literature is not, fictions and poetry written in the 19th century France. No, it's not that. It's not the body of fictions or anything, right? It's actually, the word means book learning. Okay, book learning. What this means literally is that process I was telling you guys earlier. It's not learning from a teacher. You're not sitting in a classroom learning from a teacher. From one person who takes the knowledge, assimilate it in his head, right? Distill it down to the level that you can understand, and then just give it to you in a 3-hour lecture. No, it's actually you hitting the book. Okay, now book learning doesn't mean one book. That's a book report. Okay, this is book learning with books. Okay, so that's what it means. Okay, so it's learning. It literally, and it's only later on, that something like that in the 18th century, the idea of literary production, whole bunch of what writers write, what contribute, and this is where you get Steinbeck up, Allan Poe, and whatnot. Okay, so that only came later. So the original meaning of literature here is literally that, you hitting the books to learn from it directly, from the source. And because there are many books, again, you have to have the inner organization of where the pieces meet. Likewise, the word survey. Okay, if I say, okay, what do you do for a living? I'm a survey technician. Okay, what that usually means is you go down with like a meter stick or something, or with telemetry, and you meter things, or Google Maps or whatever for land survey. So it's sort of like surveying the land kind of thing. Okay, so again, that's close to what we want, but that's not original meaning either. Okay, the original meaning is a lot closer to what we want to do. It's sort of like you try to consider, you try to contemplate. Okay, but because you're looking down, you're looking at, you're not particularly viewing just one book as the authority. Say, let's say you're a Christian, right? And if you read the Bible from the beginning to end, that's not survey. Okay, that's just like digging deep into one, source of what you believe to be the truth, the Holy Bible. That's it. You just carry one book and you just read it from the beginning to end over and over and over. Well, this is different. This is like looking at the whole body of pieces of knowledge, right? Individually as well as a whole. So there's a lot of word that has to do with, inspecting, overlooking, and so forth, right? And then, of course, the meaning where you take measurement from the ground, that's a separate one. That's also a very old meaning, but it's a different sense. So it's this sense that we're looking at. So what does it mean, literally, from etymology, from the perspective of combining the word literature and survey, is you're overlooking the whole body of books that you want to learn from directly. Okay. Now, as you know, when you look from the books, there are so many books. You have the freedom, but you also have the beauty. The freedom is you can read any books. The beauty is you have to do the choosing, right? It's like going to a buffet. Okay? You have the freedom to choose, but you have to choose. Because if you don't choose, food doesn't come to you, right? So this is why it's a directed search. Okay? You're not trying to look around at the whole tree of knowledge. You're trying to like direct yourself, direct your attention to a particular branch of knowledge, right? Now, so what does it mean? So let's again look at the word literature and survey, but let's get more, I guess, grounded. Okay. When we say literature, the books, what are we talking about? Essentially, now you can say that, yeah, this sounds a little bit traditional, right? But bear with me. Literature, this means academic papers and academic texts. What I mean is textbook, or more than that, but book of text. Okay? So think of it as papers, anywhere from 5 pages to 100 pages long. A book, anywhere from a centimeters or maybe thickness to 3-4 inches. Okay? Think of it that way. That's what you're looking at. Okay? Now let's separate. Now this is very important because when we do your own literature survey, you need to sort of like, again, this is also like a tree. You need to find where things sit. So by content, there are actually 2 kinds of things when you say, go, hit, do literature survey. There's actually 2 kinds of content. Yeah. When we talk about academic papers. So again, this is where I hope the second half, one of you will volunteer the subject that you're looking at, and I'll show you exactly what this means. And this is very obvious. So let's say I'm sharing the whole screen, right? So I'm going for the whole. Now this is my personal stat. So this is not from. Well, we go to the internet if you like. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to the internet and let's go to Google, right? Well, let's Google on what do you want to do. Say, okay, you right there. Since you're here, I might as well use it. What subject are you into?
Currently, for my gen, I'm studying wine education. Wine education.
As in drinking?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Wine.
All right. Okay. I'm not. Okay. So let's say about what? Wine. Okay. Let's do that. But it's not that kind of thing. Okay. How about this? How about something like soil chemistry. So I'm not, separating the lecture and workshop. Soil chemistry and vine, flavor, and bouquet. Okay? Something like that. Okay? So that'd be some kind of paper. So I'm not going to click into that, but let's say the role of soil chemistry in vine quality. Now, this is what I mean by a paper. Would be like here. Research paper. Okay? And again, like your paper, it will be original contribution. So when you click on this, what do you expect to see? You expect to see an evidence or a recording of research done by these 2 guys, okay, about how soil chemistry affects trade qualities or sustainability of soil management and so forth. Okay? So 2 things. It's here. It's a research paper. It's an original contribution. Okay? It should be original. Okay. On the other hand, there are, and these used to be the only kind of papers you get. Okay? So let's say up to 1950s, this is really the only kind of paper you get. But because the volume of the paper gets so big, everybody who wants to come in and write another paper has to find out where they are on the branch of knowledge, right? Has to reorient themselves, has to do the literature survey. So emerges maybe, I don't know, in the 50s, 60s, I don't really know. Okay, maybe the 80s. Sometimes the journal would just literally publish a survey paper. Okay? So whereas in normal paper, if I click into this paper, I don't know, it's going to take a long time or not, but full text available. So let's download this guy. Okay. In the beginning, there'll be like literature survey. And then the author would present his research, his finding, how he adds to the body of knowledge. Well, sometimes you would actually hit this kind of paper. This paper is nothing but review, but in depth and broad. So instead of, so this paper may mention, let's see, we download this guy. Where are we? This guy. Okay. So maybe his paper would reference, go down here, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe about 15 papers. If you actually hit another paper that literally has the word survey in the title, you might see like a list of 200. Okay, and they're trying to organize the knowledge for you. So if I search instead, okay, survey on soil quality. Okay, I just set up go with soil quality research. Okay, right. There'll be like a lot of paper like this. Soil, not soil survey, sorry. A survey on soil quality testing and blah blah blah. So this is actually somebody, an academic, reading a whole bunch of paper and doing the huge literature survey for you. So hopefully, when you click onto this guy, let's say download, hopefully it doesn't take too long. Okay, the whole paper has quote unquote no original contribution because that's not the value of this paper. He's not saying I discovered something. He's saying I have read 100 of paper, so you don't have to work. So you know where to basically. Okay, so maybe this guy he would where is he? Okay, so he reads a whole bunch of paper on production maintenance of IoTs and obviously hopefully. This is a bad example because it's got a very small bibliography, so I'm going to close that down. Okay, but you get the point. Yeah, you actually have two kinds of papers. Yeah, and when I was your age, we didn't put a lot of weight into the survey kind of paper, but nowadays, yeah, and nowadays, actually, there are coaching school for high school students to do literature survey, and the result of that is a survey paper. Yeah, and it's not adding much, but the school exercise for high school. So in terms of content, academic paper, it comes into two types, right? And you can read a lot of survey related literature in the beginning part of research paper, or the whole survey paper is all about related literature. That's my content. Okay? Okay? Now, in terms of publication, this is where you start to get like practical tips. Well, first of all, the most traditional is academic journal and proceedings. What's the difference? Academic journals like a magazine comes out every month. Most of the time, journals come like every quarter, okay, maybe even half a year. Okay, maybe some journals just come in twice a year, but most often it's a quarterly journal. Okay, so those are the journals. Proceedings, these are. It looks a little bit like journals, except it's probably much thicker. And instead of having just 20 papers for that quarter submitted sporadically. Proceedings is a paper, the roundup of paper presented at some event. Yeah, at some event, like a conference. So this would be, think of this as a magazine, think of this as a program that you get, huge compendium of papers and presentation that you get when you go to an academic conference. Yeah, in the old days, academic conference, you literally fly to places. Yeah, when I was a Ph.D. student, if you wanted prestige, you really have to publish in a journal. But that takes a long time because go back and forth with the editor. With proceeding, there's a call for paper. Like next year, there's a paper on artificial intelligence. Anybody can submit, and if your paper is good, they'll select. Now, the good things about conference for students is that, I was a sponsored student, and some of you are, most of you, at least you're sponsored by your parents. If your paper gets published and the conference happens to be in Hawaii or something nice, you get a free trip out of it. So that's why I tend to, I was in UK, right? I was in London, so I had, my paper sent to Turkey, to New Zealand, to Hong Kong, and and you get, I guess, nice free trips. And there's some nice London conference as well, but since I was already living in London, didn't had much. Okay, anyway, so that's conference. Now, not to be nitpicking, but there are two kinds of conference. One is sort of like a more detailed, more specific, more technical conference and workshop. Okay, and I give an example here, and this is where you should follow up my links. Okay, I'm not going to click all of the links here. This is actually a conference that I presented here. Again, I think this was one of those things where they move around the location, makes it attractive. So I went to New Zealand, Hong Kong, and so forth. So this will be the conference of books. It's very technical, okay? And people who are attending are just as likely to be presenter as audience. And then there's the summit and symposium. Summit and symposium is more like a big party for everybody in the field. So the topics tend to be less technical, more general coverage, but it serves a larger purpose. Sometimes to educate the public. For example, I worked for the Bank of Thailand. My scholarship sponsor for good many years, 14 years. And so Bank of Thailand has an academic symposium. Now, this wasn't necessarily just to advance the state of knowledge, but to actually educate the public. So when Thailand's economy, we were making a transition of monetary policy toward inflation targeting, for example, in order for the public to understand, what the Bank of Thailand is doing, targeting inflation as opposed to target growth. One of the good way of communicating to the large audience, so we rented out the whole central conference hall, and we hosted 200-300 people. So symposium are huge events, and again, this has there are many years. It goes by many years, right? It's like a series. I obviously picked this year because this was the last year I was with the Bank of Thailand, and my paper is up there. Here, there's a paper here somewhere with my co-author, right? But you will notice that the subtopic is not. It's sort of like a subject, as opposed to finding, right? So central bank balance sheet and policy implication. It's not finding out that the implication of this aspect, blah, blah, blah. So it's a bit more broad. Okay? Economic rationale of central banking, right? I'm not finding something. I'm actually elaborating on why we have central banks that does a certain thing, certain mandate, vis-a-vis policy space, conducting economic, financial economic stability and so forth. So that would be two kind of things that we find. Now, the bread and butter tend to be here and here. Now, I have to warn you, there are now three kinds of journals. Well, not three kinds of journals. It used to be like this. Well, top tier journals mean very difficult to publish. And not only very difficult to publish, it's not just when you get rejected from top tier academic journal. Sometimes it doesn't mean the quality is not good. Sometimes it means you're ahead of your time. Okay? Actually, in the history of economic Nobel Prizes, you find a few papers that were not published in a prestigious top-tier academic journal. Not because the quality wasn't good, but because it was so good, it was so ahead of the time, even the editors of this journal couldn't understand. Right? Now, I can give you a two classic case. One is the Black-Scholes Prize that, didn't get published. Well, it did get published in Journal of Political Economy, so that's still prestigious. But, you get something like this where the panel themselves couldn't understand it. Another good example would be something like, Kalman. Kalman did get a Ph.D. because nobody could understand or nobody saw his role of signal filter in electrical engineering. So they didn't give him a PhD. But it was so useful that MIT, I think, had to give him Ph.D. 50 years later just to recommend. Right. So top tier academic journals, usually it's a guarantee of good quality. But not every papers in there are that interesting, and not all interesting and groundbreaking papers are in top tiers. At the extreme end, there's what's called pay-to-publish academic journals. You've had I don't know if you know, a few years ago, there was a big controversy that Malaysian academics wanted to, get professorship or whatever, and start publishing left and right in this pay-to-publish. What it means is it's a little bit not high quality. Okay, as long as you pay, $200, they'll publish it. Okay, and then there's kind of like what I call middle earth. So this is where a lot of things you'll probably be able to rely on. Nowadays, I wouldn't rely on this top tier academic journals because by the time it gets there, the technology tends to be a little bit old. So there's a lot of good pickings in the middle earth journals. Yeah. So these are where you find them. So this would be the traditional. Okay. Now your paper, whatever it is, will require some of these academic references. Okay. Then you can go to other sources. So I'm going to quickly go over this. These are what's called government and industry white paper. They're kind of like research paper, but they're not so academic. Okay. And I give an example here. So communicate by official bodies. When I was at the Bank of Thailand, this was the Bible that I had to work because we were translating this capital adequacy regime for the commercial banks in Thailand, and this was the master plan. Yes, BIS was sort of like a central forum, central bank for central banks, as it were. Yeah, so they kind of had authority on how to govern risk in a bank. And so they have this paper, we click on it, and this becomes like a masterpiece. We translate this into Thai, we have Thai commercial bank implemented, and have technical people vetted and so forth. A more recent thing that I've had to come in contact with my consultancy project is transfer pricing regime. So this is published by OECD. Again, it's a very official body. OECD is an organization of industrial economies. Okay, so even though we're not part of that, what they publish becomes such a ubiquitous, well-accepted standard that Thailand tax authority would have to go with it to be harmonious with our trading partners. And then there are things like public commission. You see a lot of this. So this is very active in Europe. Europeans like to write commission papers. EU, EC, there are like 1,000 of them here. Okay. Same with United Nations. So this would be some kind of findings, so maybe, and usually has the word white paper in the name. Like this one, for example, white paper in artificial intelligence, European approach to Atlanta. Okay. So it's a little bit of a government policy kind of thing. White paper, connecting. So, oops, I think this is the same paper. I just did pick up something randomly for you guys to look at. Then there are something that's a little bit more advertorial than just a government publication by a public commission. What it is like it's a white paper, but it actually promotes a company. Now these companies do not sell fruits. They don't sell apples and oranges. They sell risk management model, which is very technical. So if they sell risk management model, they have to have a way of educating the public as well. So the technical details of their, their service or their models would be in the industry white papers. Okay. These can be referenced in your thing as well. So you find a lot of good work here. Sometimes this is easy to read because they're trying to make it palatable for the general audit. But you cannot publish on a diet of white papers alone. Okay? It just would not be valid. You need proper academic grounding. Finally, two more. One is it's called public dissemination. This is a lot more modern than when I was your age. When I was your age, none of this appeared in the reference in any papers I used. But nowadays, yes. I'll give you 3 examples. The last one is literally just a blog. you can literally reference a blog now. Yeah, it's okay. It's not all that kosher, but it's doable. It's fine. So for example, you click to this and you can reference the order. There's an order, there's application, but Masai also has a blog that reference that and so forth. Now these two can be together. This one is very useful for those of you who are going to apply digital intelligence. So these are literally what's called paper with code. Now, what it means is that it's a public meaning everybody can get to. Yeah, that's the word public dissemination, right? It's meant there to spread, and it's a community platform, so people kind of interact with each other. Now with this, so for example, let's click on this guy. You go to a website that has an abstract. If you click on this, you get the paper. Now, where are the codes? These are the codes. Okay. What it means is that a lot of data science work paper has the problem, the methodology, and the data. You read the problem in the paper. You read the methodology in the paper. And the paper also tells you where the data came from. Now, in academic work, it's very important that the work can be replicated. Also, it can be applied. Replicated means somebody else can independently run the same methodology on the same set of data and get that result. Sort of like making sure it's not, nonsense. Application means, hey, I like this, but I want to use it on my problem. This is kind of like the branching I was telling you about earlier, right? It's like, let's say there's a paper with code page for Sir Francis Galton on linear regression on the height of children, regressing upon height of parents, and then somebody wants to say, hey, I want to apply this to Irish population or to non-human population, right? So in the paper there'll be a mathematical formula. Well, nowadays the mathematical formula is not enough. You need the computer code to do that, and it takes forever to implement the code. So the authors, these guys, are so nice that the code that they use to run this, they make it publicly available here. Not only that, they're nice people, but there are not nicer people. There are also other nice people who maybe like the technique so much, but are better programmers, and they contribute their own version of the implementation. So these are kind of like listed, and there's this is what I mean by the community. There's actually like a star rating, people like this a lot, get 9,000 star, and there's some review and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of like a community. Well, anyway, when you click onto this, okay, this takes you into second kind of platform, which I showed you here. So GitHub. Yeah, well there. So the GitHub for this paper is this. So when I click here, now this is a huge effort by God knows how many people. It's a whole team of Google, right? It's a whole team of Google. AlphaFold. This is a huge breakthrough last year, or even 2 years ago, the early version, right? It's a huge, God knows how many projects, right? But in a mini way, when you do your own contribution, you do the same thing. Okay, and I can't use other people, for example, so I use my own self. So for example, this one more interesting. So this is my paper with your TA. We did this. It was actually motivated by a consultancy project we did. So again, that's your TA, that's me. And because it's not really a big project, it's kind of specific. We make the code available, but nobody else can contribute. It's not that chapter. But if you click on this, okay, you will also get the codes. You also get the codes. Get them README, get the codes. So these are public. These are public things. Yeah. So these are examples that tiny. This is huge example by big team. Now this community. What's important is this. Number one, you can reference this paper. Okay, as listed on paper with code. So paper with code is like a journal. It's a source. But also, this paper can appear in other journals, right? So when you click onto this PDF, it could be just a paper that's submitted to this, or it can be a paper that's actually a journal version elsewhere. But they put it here as well so you can see the code, because journals don't publish codes. So this is extremely useful for guys like us, me, who work in data applied digital intelligence. This is almost the go-to first, okay? Because even if I like the technique, if the algorithm isn't coded and made freely available, it takes a long time for me to replicate the code or write the code from scratch, okay? So the appearance in journal is important. That's sort of like a quality kind of check mark, but the codes will be here. So you will see in some of the paper, I would just reference, I get this paper. Instead of naming the journal, I would just name paper with codes and give the links. And of course, if it's published in a proper paper, in a journal, in a conference, and archived here, you can put both, right? So you can say that, it's on journal or from AI in finance, this year and that year, this page and that page, and the code's available here. Yeah. So there's and finally, this is a trick. It's not a trick. This is something that I use a lot when I was again, I worked when I finished my PhD, I worked for the Bank of Thailand. I didn't work for the university. In fact, I only became academic when I semi-retired a year or two ago. But because I was working for the Bank of Thailand, we didn't have access to academic journals, basically. In fact, sometimes I would use a login code for student interns. So student interns like you guys come to the Bank of Thailand, we do some project. But because you guys are students, a lot of them come from abroad, like maybe somebody from Oxford coming to the Bank of Thailand for the summer, but definitely has the login to the Oxford University Library. I would kind of use its access to get the journal. Anyway, point is, even nowadays, journals are a lot more open-minded. So when you go to journals for a paper, usually you don't have to pay for it. But there are still many occasions where you still have to pay for it. And here's where my trick comes in. Okay? Go to the author's preprint site. What it means is this. The author would write some paper, okay, submit to a journal, okay, and the journal editor would say, ask them to add this, do that, blah, 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 get a very nice and very nice format published. And that would get locked in to the journal's website. And you can't access for free. However, the preprint version, the version that the authors already wrote before we submitted, maybe it's not as complete, it's written, it's not nicely formatted, but it's got pretty much all the content you need. Okay? Then you can go to the author's website and it's very good. Okay, you can get the same, and you can reference that. And few of those that I use, and in fact, I make all my papers available, most of my papers are all some secrets. ResearchNet, ResearchGate.net, and SSRN, Social Science Research Network. Okay, so for example, we click here, and this is, again, I can't, I wouldn't. You're right to use other people as an example, so I use myself. So now I was not an academic, so I didn't really see journal publication. So my papers are kind of like here somewhere, right? Now, if some of these papers were published in a journal, you see the idea here. Some of this. Yeah, like this one is also, I think, in a conference. Sometimes I publish in conference, but definitely not journal. So you can click to this. So even if let's say I was a university and I needed publication for my position or whatever. Say I published this paper somewhere in a journal. That paper can get locked in. Like this one is published in a banking conference. Now this conference could lock the publication, so you might have to pay for it. But the version that the authors have here are usually preprint or maybe even vertically final version that's not embargoed. Okay, so when you click to this, you literally download. You can download this paper, and this is mostly free. So the author's Mimeo and preprint archive, virtually all of them are freely accessed. Okay, so this is what even academics use this as well to let's see where that comes from. Where's it? Open PDF browser. Where's the PDF browser? Okay. Okay. So again, see, it's not that nice. It's just a preprint, so the format is not that pretty. It's not like a journal kind of thing, but it's got all the formula. It's got all the, graph, just like the final paper. Okay. But again, the option is the even if the journals block this publication, doesn't make it available, you can still access all this. Now, this was, again, a lot more important when I was in the Bank of Thailand. I didn't have access, and back then journals really did not share. Nowadays, journals are competing with blogs and whatnot, so they try to be more open-minded. So, but still, one thing is, the author's own Mimeo website page would tend to have something that maybe in the pipeline. So you get an early, it's not quite complete, but you get the earliest hint of the area of research. So this is very useful. So these are the sources that we would go to. So that's the what, right? That's the what. Now, academic texts. Again, I'm going to do the same thing. By content, there are two kinds of texts. I'm being general here. The first is what you would think of as a textbook. It's basically a foundation knowledge. It's a textbook. These are usually written by one or two authors. The authors themselves write the whole book. Could be one guy, or two guys, or three guys, or four, but basically they're responsible for writing the whole book. Yeah. And this is very cohesive. There's an introduction, part 1, part 2, this chapter, send the result to chapter 2, and the finding from chapter 2 goes to the discussion in chapter 5, and that sort of thing. It's very cohesive. It reads like a textbook. Okay? But it could be technical and more advanced than just call it textbook that you guys read. Right. And then there are the sort of like compendium. These are books. You would notice that usually instead of listing it as the author, it will be listed by editor. So this book would say something like it's edited by 2 or 3 guys. And you go there, the book would have 10 chapters. Each chapter would be like a separate book. So this reads, in terms of what it looks like, it looks a bit more like the journal proceeding, in that every chapter is a separate paper, not written by the same guys. Now, the editor would probably write an introductory chapter and maybe contribute some original finding. But then he would invite his friends and blah, blah, blah. Let me show you what it looks like. So, yeah, let's go to my own stash and have my own research. Okay, this is my reads. So let's go to AI and ML and let's go to, let's say I'm going in graph neural network, happens to be something that I'm reading a little bit more recently. But let's say, okay, where are we? Okay, so let's do this one. There. Yeah. Okay. So let's say this is a bit big. So let's go to general text. Yeah. Okay. So if you see something like this, okay, if you see something like this, yeah. So it's like what it actually spells out the textbook. So it's by this guy. Okay. So the beginning, the end, there's a chapter, blah blah blah. It's very nice, it's beginning to end. Let me show you what edited book looks like. Well, it's a little bit like this, where in the beginning of the chapter, instead of having the title, would actually have different authors. Okay. Okay, and something very close to a lecture, to a textbook is a lecture note. Okay, it's a lecture note. Maybe let's do this one. So, yeah. Okay, so this is a good example. This one is like I don't use particularly that often. You see the name? I don't know if you can see it, but it's not the author. These guys are not authors. They are editors. They themselves are authors, the respective author. But let's see. Okay, Formby and Hill, right? But this is actually series editor. So okay, so edited by Bittner, Kendall, and Chen. You go to the table of content. This is an old. I don't use this one very much, but see, each chapter is actually a separate by somebody else. Okay, but you see that the guy appears here and there. So Bittner writes here, so that's him, and then I think that's her, that's the same guy. So when you go to different chapters, it would be a separate contribution, but it's cohesive in the sense that it's living on the same sub branch of a tree. Okay, so it's kind of related. But when you write one chapter, you're not responsible for what happened somewhere else because you're a contributor, you're not editor. So it then it's up to the editor to write a preface or introduction that say, this paper connects with that paper here. So it's a little bit harder to read. But what's good is that in here, you actually can have different perspectives. So this is one. So when you list as a reference, you don't list the whole book. You list this paper as it appears in this book. You can also have as a separate entry, this paper as appeared in the same book. Okay, so your reference list would not just have one volume. You actually have this and this and this. Okay, you could. Yeah. Right. So this is where the edited compilation comes in, and this is a very rich source of academic text. And when you reference, you can reference a whole book. You can reference a chapter of a book. It could even be a chapter of a textbook, or it could be a chapter of an edited compilation, like I say right now. And then you can also reference lecture notes. Now, again, I can't show you what other people's lectures notes are, but I will tell you how to access them easily. But it will be like this. So let's say this was a lecture note I did for the Bank of Thailand. This was when I was very young, I guess. Not that one. Right. So this would be like the Bank of Thailand. I was responsible for quantitative models and enterprise financial engineering. So there's talks and okay. So these are like foundation notes. So the financial mathematics and quantitative finance. So let's go to quantitative finance. A bit more interesting. So financial, what's it? Foundation notes and quantitative finance, right? So this would be written like a series of lecture notes. This is what most university lecturers do when they have their own website. So let's say I was writing about credit risk modeling or ether calculus. Some of these are okay. So when you click on this or some of this randomly, okay, so it would either open up or allow you to go to see. Right. So let's see what I was writing. Okay, so some kind of lecture about interest rate, how you, this is very simple. Utility theory, this is explain why you take risk and you do not take risk, why people prefer or not prefer risk and so forth. So these are foundation notes. This will be like lecture notes. Now, watch the screen carefully, and I'm not going to type in anybody. Okay, so let's make it a note. What happens is this. A lot of time when you search, let's say you search internet, right? And you put in the word something like class note or lecture note, you are going to be directed to a PDF download. Now, what tends to happen is like this. HTTPS, okay? And then this university .edu say slash squiggly line, squiggly line here, faculty, okay, and maybe there's a faculty names James Bonds or Bond James, okay, slash spring 2022, and then you come to that note that says something like lecture 3, okay, on something .pdf. Okay. Now you get this thing, but and this is not for reference, but this is again for your lifelong learning. What happens is you tend to be able to do this. Just go to the URL and enter this. You will then be taken to the page that lists all the lectures that this guy has written, something like that. So maybe there's a course name, something like blah 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 102, something like that. Yeah, and this will take you to like a course web page, like a course view, okay, except public. Then you get a lot of material. Now, when you use this, if you use this in your reference, make sure you reference it as James Bond, whatever, okay? And then you would say lecture notes. Yeah. So you can do that, okay? Now I show you, in this case, the Bank of Thailand, my lecture note is available publicly, so you don't have to, go to, it's actually a very nice table of content, so you don't actually have to do what I did, which is to erase the PDF bit and go to the folder. So this is kind of like already organized as a folder, okay? But most lecture notes or lectures don't do this, okay? So that's why that trick that I was telling you was helpful. So let's go back to us, okay? So this is where you get the lecture notes, publication, right? So now, let me go over 2 more points and maybe we take a 2-3 minute break and get another cup of coffee or whatever. So, okay, now the literature survey, let's go back to what I was showing earlier. That academic paper comes in 2 versions. So now, you are going to be writing. Okay? Are you writing this or are you writing this? Okay? If you're writing this, the purpose of the literature survey is here. If you're writing this, the purpose of the literature survey is here. Okay? So let's go one by one. So you're writing original paper. Yeah? This was other people, right? You're writing your own now. So for the research paper, the whole objective of having a literature survey is to give context. Again, you find where you are. You know where you are in the tree of knowledge. There's a spot for you, an empty spot, so you're not stepping on anybody's toe, right? It's something new, hasn't been done. That's a spot for you. That's an empty spot you're going to occupy. And then you show your route, how it relates to other pieces of knowledge. You did that for yourself. You write that in the beginning part so the audience, somebody reading your paper, can also get that picture. Okay? That A, this is where the paper is talking about, the topic, the general topic, the subtopic. This paper hasn't been done before, and it's related somehow. Okay? So, what tends to happen is, now this is getting closer to the how. What combination of problem, data, methods have other people done close to you? So this is, where's the next branch? What's the nearest branch? Yeah. So you would hear a statement like, so-and-so applied this and that technique to solve such and such problem. Okay, that's the syntax. Right. What else would you say? Okay, you can say that, well, what elements from those is my work drawing on? Okay, so the language would be something like, based on such and such by so and so, we extend the methodology, blah, 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 blah. So what element of the previous work, related work, that you use or you build on, you extend. Okay? And finally, this is more like an adverb, right? You have to say that existing literature have not exactly done what you're trying to do. This is justifying your place where you stand. Okay? So and so has done this. It's not done badly, it's done well, but it's not, they haven't quite done that. They haven't addressed this aspect of the problem, or they have addressed this population, right? Sir Francis Galton has done this on English population, but who knows, maybe Irish people are different, maybe monkeys are different, right? So, yeah, it's not saying that they haven't done a good job, because they haven't done the thing you're looking for. And that's why you need to do it. Okay? So the literature survey, the writing part, has to have these three narratives. Okay? Where are you? Okay? Where are you? There's a spot for you. And how do you relate? Except, I kind of put, where are you? How do you relate? And there's a spot for you. So the order is like, okay? So maybe I should get that in there. So, which sub-branch of the knowledge tree are we currently at? Where are we? Okay? How is my work going to draw from existing work? And yes, my work is new. There's a spot. I'm not repeating. I'm just not really repeating some other people's work. It's new. So that's the context. So that's the job of literature survey. Now, if your job is to write the literature survey paper, now this means you're not actually contributing. You don't have to say that I'm contributing something. You actually just the whole thing. The whole thing is literature survey. Okay? Your contribution is in the organization. Right? So you're not saying, in this sub-branch of knowledge, there are 100 papers. Here they are. I list them alphabetically. That would be terrible, right? That would just be a list. But what you would actually do is like the editor in that example I was giving you earlier. You would be saying, this bits of paper address that paper address this, that paper is similar to this, but not so much because they have a different data set. That paper used exactly the same data set, but they used a different method, so they found something else, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So the language would be something, and this is an example. I just happened to be my kid was working on like a PDS. So let's say the topic is PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? So you say, well, okay. Well, I want to specify it's not this a PTSD from natural disaster, but it has to be crime-induced or crime or natural, or war, or by civilian, blah blah blah, and this and that. So every time you add additional condition, you have narrower set of papers. So you would say, imagine, right? Okay, watch this carefully. So let's say if I'm going to do this survey, right? And now, I'm just going down here, but then I go down to the part, I'm just picking one part. So PTSD has 3,000 paper. Okay? PTSD that has to do with maybe being a family, losing a family member to cancer or something like that. That's not covered here. So if it's about war or crime or catastrophe induced, so maybe that takes it down to 1,500 paper. Okay? Now, a lot of this would be like PTSD on soldiers, but nobody cares about civilians, right? So maybe you look at the civilians, so you separate the civilian versus the literate. So maybe you get 1,000 paper there, maybe 200 paper here, and then you separate further, right? Are you looking at psychological, social science, or maybe healthcare perspective? Do we have enough money to take care of our veterans? So forth, right? So let's say at 3,000 paper here, right? By the time you say war, belligerent, psychological effect only, maybe that comes down to 50 papers, right? So it kind of like breaks down, right? So maybe there's something else that, like I said, it's not in here, like losing a member to cancer. That's not in here, so that's not there. So however comprehensive that is, hopefully if you're doing a survey, you're not leaving anything out. So maybe if it's a PTSD, you should have something like losing loved one here as well. Yeah. But I think most of the time PTSD they don't use it for like losing loved ones to cancer. I think that's why it happens. Anyway, so that's the what. Yeah. So let's take a video pause so that we can literally stop the recording or whatever and